Hello. So thank you very much. Yeah, good to see you all, familiar and some not so familiar faces. Thank you for attending the talk today. Unfortunately, my wife is bringing our daughter to bed, so I can't wear my CGDC shirt, which I would wear proudly. But anyway, it's good to see you here. So, um, the talk today has the title Recreating the Authentic Historical World of Jesus. And I'll start my presentation here. Wonderful. And who doesn't know me yet? I'm Amin, Joshua, from Lightword Productions, CEO and founder, and we are creating the Bible game 1 of 500. You can check it out on the internet, 1 of 500-game.com. But yeah, now I'm happy to present to you the challenges that come with this recreation process and which learnings we had during this process. So I've 4 bullet points why an accurate historical context is important. Second, the difficulties and challenges of historical correctness. Third, good sources and bad sources. And fourth, a short guide with do's and don'ts. Little trigger warning. Some things might sound at the beginning that a little triggering to some of you, but you should definitely hear me out before you go crazy. That's in general a good thing in life. So, why the historical context is important. The first question is, what is historically correct, if we say historically correct? Because we have the claim we're doing our game as historically correct as possible. And then a lot of people are like, oh, wow, awesome. This means so with no miracles and so on. And that's not what I mean. But what we're meaning when we're saying historically correct is that we use the sciences, humanities, theology, archaeology, sociology, and so on to recreate the world from back then as accurate as possible and give the frame in which the texts take place the correct frame, as correct as possible. So my first point is, if you have if you go for historical correctness, then you get a better understanding of the biblical texts. I think all of you know, if you look into the historical context, this changes your understanding of the text, and some of the texts are definitely a little bit foreign to us. And as soon as we understand the world back then, and we get some images from here and there, then we can understand, okay, the story is taking place like this and this, and these are the dynamics in these stories, and so on. And this, of course, shapes also what theological or dogmatic conclusions we draw from the texts. So this might be much more important at some point. At some points, there are some like butterfly effects that could, change a whole dogma that you're following. And last but not least, you get a more vivid and powerful imagination of the events of the Bible. And this is just a thing of beauty, I think. As soon as you get deeper into all the details and so on, it's not only like black and white text, but it gets a lot more colorful. Second point for me is be true to the truth. Because if you claim to communicate the truth as a Christian, then you should have the aspiration to search for the truth. And you can't say, we're not taking it too seriously here with all the details and so on. We just go for with the text and so on. That's more important. I think it's a general attitude if you want to stick as close as possible to the truth or not. And this is something that is very important for us in our works. This is very interesting. I don't know. Do you recognize the movie? Some of you might be triggered. Some might love. Funny thing here is, one of our research professors said that's the best cloth research and definitely the best sandals I've seen so far in a Bible movie. I won't say who it was, but it's pretty much consensus under the professors that the Life of Brian has really good research cloth-wise, and this might be sometimes a little bit embarrassing to us because it's obviously a movie that makes a lot of fun about Christianity and so on. But if they can make if they have better research and are closer to the truth, like historical truth, then yeah, this gives me some thoughts and activate some processes. Third point, be a credible witness in the world. A person X could be anyone, but that's somebody I heard that sentence 1,000 of times. Something like, I mean, you obviously cannot believe today in general because of science and so on. And so the question is, how would a person react if your basic statement is, if they're asking, hey, how are you handling like historical correctness or something like that? And then you answer, we're true to the Bible. Or you answer, we are doing it as historically correct as possible with archaeologists, cultural scholars, theologians, historians, and philologists. I mean, if the other guy is not a Christian, then he might be okay. I will definitely not go with that guy who says we're true to the Bible, but with the other guy. You can still be true to the Bible if you have the first answer with we're doing it historically correct as possible and so on. But it's a complete different narrative that you're driving there, especially to non-Christians. If you have that claim and can give it to the outside in a authentic and believable way, because you're actually doing it, doing good research. Fourth point here is you can enlarge your target group. Let's say a Bible game is primarily for Christian gamers. Then if you have a claim, hey, I want to do this historically correct as possible, then you immediately get historically interested people as well on your in your target group. Then there are religiously interested people who are maybe not so deep into history, but they want to find more out about religions. And then they will say, okay, I rather go with the guys who tell me accurate data about a religion. And then on the B2B side, there are churches and schools, because if you have proven data, then organizations can work much better with your product. Except you're doing no good research. I have a little example from our game, Levis Tax Station, and this is a little bit filled with speculation as well, but there are some points, and you will see why this is so crazy. And I have a recency bias here, therefore I'm bringing this up. So the questions: where was the tax station? What did Levi know about Jesus before? Are much more important than you might think at the first view, because does it change something in the understanding of the text, and does it even change parts of your theology? And this thought comes from a conversation I had with somebody, and he was like, yeah, you can't really choose to follow Jesus, but Jesus chooses you. And this is the big question in all Christianity and church history and so on, about how much is grace and how much can people do and so on. And this person used this as an example, and he said, look, in my Bible, there it is. Jesus said, just come, and they have no conversation or anything before encounter, and he just says, follow me. And then he's like a ghost and is, all right, I'll follow you. And I saw in my research even movies that do it exactly like that. And this is another scene, another truth, another theological concept, or has other theological implications than having Levi at having conversations before or encounters before. And then the third question that is very interesting: is it connected to the sixth servant of from the officer of Capernaum, the centurio? And I would say it is. And then the question is, does this also change the understanding of the centurio's passage? And here is why. This is actually the movie. Where here are some things that are definitely not correct. Like, it's in the middle of or most likely not correct. It's in the middle of the city, and the tax station was probably not in the middle of the city. And there's a Roman soldier, and back then in Galilee there were no Roman soldiers. That is a big shocker. That was the standard opinion, like until maybe 20 years ago or something like that. But then, historians and theologians and so on found out, okay, Herod was a vassal king, and in vassal kingdoms in the Roman Empire, there were no Roman soldiers for the official system and authorities, but they had their own soldiers and auxiliaries, so help troops and so on. And there might have been Roman soldiers here and there, but definitely not like the official police are not there. At this point, there are no Roman soldiers. It's starting only after the war, the Jewish war. And this is very interesting because in Jerusalem there are Roman soldiers, so you can mix it up very easily. But it's not part of Herod's. Here, the second thing you see here, in the first picture you saw the white stones, but in Capernaum there were no white stones. The houses were made of basalt. I don't know how to pronounce it in English, but it's pretty black anthracite, or how you ever you pronounce that. And this crashes a little bit the imagination that we have from a town like that, and a lot of movies they don't care about it. But if you have been in Capernaum, you will see these stones everywhere. So, but back to our Centurio and Levi and Tax Station. So what you do in archaeology is you have a lot of gaps, because you mostly you have bad sources, or no sources at all. So you need to fill the gaps in some way. And what you're doing there is that you take other like houses or situations or text sources and so on, and you try to project them to into another situation. And we have actually a source about a tax collector in the Roman Empire who sits at a booth, a tax booth that is at the shore, and he is in company of a centurio, because the centurio is the one who protects the tax collector with his troops. And this makes total sense, also for Capernaum, because you needed to pay taxes yearly, and when you brought goods from one area, rain area, into another area, like from another kingdom or something like that. And at the Sea of Galilee, there we have these two different. The one is from Herod, and the other is from what is his name? Yeah, his brother. I just forgot it, but I'm sure some of you will know it and write it in the in the chat. So you're at the harbor, and boats are coming and going, and so you have this tax station at the harbor, and you can and then you will land there or leave there, and the tax collector will collect the taxes for the goods that you bring there. And therefore it's very likely, very likely, that the tax collector station is at the harbor. And another cool thing about it is, hey, when Jesus was like doing all his speeches and called the other disciples and made the big catch with Peter and so on, it's pretty there's a pretty high chance that Levi or Matthew from his tax station saw these events or could listen to the speeches. So it's not like, okay, I have no idea who this guy is, and he comes and I'm like, okay, I'm coming with you. But it's much more likely that he sits there and he hears the speeches and he sees the things Jesus does, and a process already starts inside of him. And most likely he's like, okay, there's no way I can go with him. I mean, I'm a tax collector, like a sinner. People don't like me. How can I be with such a holy man? But dang, I would like to be part of this group. and go with this man, but I obviously can't. And then Jesus comes and says, "Hey, you go with me." And then he's like, "Oh, all right, I'm in." That's that changed at least my understanding and my imagination of the text in a significant way. Some more challenges on the historical side. So, because I'm talking too slow or too much, I need to speed up a little bit. One problem, tradition and remnant. So there are like stuff that is left there by purpose from mostly rich people to transmit a message. That's tradition. And then there's remnant that's randomly left over things from everyday life with no purpose to transmit a message. And we don't really have a lot of good sources from the time of Jesus, especially from the first century. And this piece of cloth is pretty much the only preserved piece of clothing we know or we have from the time of Jesus. Is from a whole like Dead Sea Scroll cave or something like that, and everything else is rotten, so you don't have any proof that it's this way or that way. And the second thing is archaeology is interpretation too. It's not like, okay, we find something and then we know exactly how this is. Much more it is you have gaps and then you need to interpret the gaps and you need to fill the gaps with interpretation. So what people say when they say historically correct, then this is mostly not pretty much certain not historically correct, but it's maybe a good and evident conclusion, but yeah, you know what I mean. So example in Capernaum, we have these findings. This is pretty luxury actually, because you don't have that anywhere else in such a dimension, because mostly there are buildings on the excavations. But here we have the findings of these walls and so on from Capernaum. But the problem is they are from like 8 different centuries. And so you don't know what the village looked like in the first century. So we have began to clean the the wrong walls, or what we actually think the wrong walls are. So it makes sense for a building actually. And what we know about how buildings were structured back then. And then, for example, here there are 4 different ways how a house in Capernaum could have looked like. The first one is very fundamental, with this cane here and clay and roof. And then this one is actually from our concept art, and we're pretty confident about it. This here is also pretty good. I think the painter and the researcher his name is Balok. And then here we have a lot of more plaster, and there is a big fight that if houses in Capernaum had plaster or not. And there are like professors, even in our team, who are like, hands down there were plaster, and then others, hands down there were no plaster. And then there are some, hands down, there were two floors and there was also a second floor, and then others, hands down, the walls are too thin, no second floor. So it's pretty crazy, and you need to guess a little bit. Another challenge here is normative and descriptive texts. So a lot of texts that we find is that somebody gives you a he writes about how the world should be and not how it actually is. And this is a big problem, because the only source we have found about hair and hair covering is from 70 AD, and it's a normative text from a rabbi. And he says the hairline needs to be covered, or he says is covered, or is to be covered. And in all the Christian movies, we find this type of head coverings, because it's, I think, in our context today, it's much more like it's also a separation from the Muslim world and showing, hey, we're a little bit more liberal. We're decent, but not showing everything, but a little bit. And this is very interesting and hard to find out what's actually the truth here. But this is very interesting. You can give attention to it in Bible movies. Archaeology is puzzling. I had that before. So you compare a lot of things, like for the synagogue, you have 4 different synagogues from somewhere, and then you need to reconstruct how the synagogue in Capernaum could have looked like, because the only one we see there is from the 4th century. A quick run through good sources, bad sources. My personal TV series guideline for TV shows and movies. The first red flag is Jesus white. Then the second one is Capernaum built with basalt. I haven't found no show yet that have done this. Are there Romans in Galilee? And are the hairlines covered? And this gives you some indicators. Hey, okay, how much thoughts did they put in? Or they could have just come to other conclusions. Internet, please don't Google and take random results. Be suspicious if there are no sources. If somebody says it was like this and this, and he has no source for it, that's not so good. Some positive examples: Mr. Rittmeyer, he's a great archaeologist, and has also references. Literature, be careful with old books. Look for the new stuff and check if the author has an agenda, because there are sometimes people who have make some pre-decisions, like Jesus hasn't resurrected, and look for researchers. We have done that a lot. That's some of the concept art we have made, and what we are doing is we're taking concept art, and then we're creating it, we're showing it to the researchers, and then they can give us good feedback. Hey, okay, this is correct, this is not correct, you need to change this and this. As said, get help from the researchers. They're doing it for their whole life, and they're more open than you might think, because they're like, yippee, eventually someone is using my knowledge, and you can actually see it somewhere. And it gives you credibility, and it takes you closer to the truth. A little list of some researchers we're working with, a lot of professors and so on. Name dropping. And then my last slide, do's and don'ts. Do's: read and compare different sources. You can decide to go with one research school, because there are like archaeology schools and so on. Get references for your artists as soon as possible. Create references on your own and show them to experts. Get professional researchers if you can. Learn the difference between normative and descriptive texts. And this is missing here. At some point, you need to make a decision. We suffered under this a lot because we tried to find the truth, and then learned the hard way that sometimes you can't find it. And especially, finally, you need to make a decision. Don't just Google and take the first best internet source. Don't just copy from movies and TV shows, but check these sources. Don't use too old books. Don't trust sources without sources. And don't try to find a final proof for everything, because it will make you crazy. So we definitely know in 5 years, or maybe even in 1 year, we will discover a lot of things that will show us that we were completely wrong about some stuff. But we have definitely a good conscience that we have done the best we could. Thank you for your attention. So let me take 30 minutes talking nonstop. Classic theologian stuff. Question: how do you settle the debates on your team when multiple people disagree on what the design or content should be? Depending on research. I mean, this is on creative work in general. This is a whole different question. But on research, so we're collecting the data, and then we check, is the source reliable? And then if the sources are like even reliable, then we just say, okay, what supports the message the best? What is the most thankful way to go for our game? Because we're artists too, right? And we need to make a product, and it needs to be user friendly. So yeah, that's definitely then the decider. How do you distinguish between pure sources and corrupt sources for historical information? This is a very good question. So I'd say if you went to college, university or so on, you usually learn methods of critical scientific research and so on. So this gives you a big bonus there. Then you definitely, I'm a big fan of interdisciplinary teams. We are very interdisciplinary, and we have theologians on our team, and some with more focus on the message, some with more focus on the archaeology and so on. If you can get help from people, it's not forbidden to ask people for help. But I mean, like I said, to answer to your question, if there are sources in the internet source, then you know, okay, this guy is serious. And if there are no sources, then it's always a little bit suspicious. Or you need to know, okay, this is from Professor. You can go to the About Us or whatever page and look who has done this. And then sometimes you see, it's Jehovah's Witnesses, or you see, okay, it's a a collection of professors who did it. What are the best resources you have found for maps? Google Maps or historical maps, probably is the question. Actually, Google Maps is not too bad with the satellite mode and so on. There are definitely some differences in like the water height, for example, for the Sea of Galilee. There are other like height maps. You can even scan them somehow and then convert them into a game world. It's crazy, but that works actually. Yeah, and then I think you just need to use the common encyclopedia and so on. Unfortunately, I'm not too familiar with the like English encyclopedia and so on, but more with the German ones. So I can't tell you right off my mind which one to look in. What is your projector release date for episode 1? Phil Conrad, this is not a topic related question. I could just say let yourself be surprised, Phil. Or the end of 22 or beginning of 23. How large would you consider the audience for historical authenticity? This is a good question. I actually have some data in my pitch deck about it. I have done research on this. Let me check. Is that really correct? No, I can't. That wouldn't be serious to answer that in this way. That's also sometimes the most serious answer. No, I can't say anything about it. Or at least no hard number here at this point. You just can check like games with historical focus, like the Total War row, or like also Assassin's Creed, and check how many people are into exactly these types of games, and then check comparable games with comparable mechanics and so on in a different setting, and then you might see some differences, but that's very vague. How would you go about research for a fantasy world versus allowing freedom for custom world building? I need to read this again. How would you go about research for a fantasy world versus allowing freedom for custom world building? Sorry, I don't fully get the question. Is it how? I'm looking in the chat. Maybe someone can explain it to me better. Or Scott, you can. I'm so sorry, Scott. What are your favorite historians' resources for researching biblical history? Favorite. I don't know if favorite resource. So in German there is something called Bibelwissenschaft.de. It's like biblescience.com or something like that, and it's a great encyclopedia for a lot of stuff. But I have, if you have written a paper, a thesis on anything, you need to if you're looking for one thing, you need to look into like 10 books or 15 sources and so on. So there's not this favorite source, but I would say, yeah, the favorite sources are more probably people and not books. We have experts from very different areas in the biblical archaeology. Some with a focus on Hellenistic world, some with ancient Judaism, some with excavation and so on. And I pretty much prefer to ask the right person because they have done the most of the work before me. One more. I'm not sure if you're aware, rabbis have a lot of information you're missing. Have you considered asking a Messianic rabbi for assistance? That's a very good thing. I have. Oh no, I don't have it here. But there is the Bible, a Jewish explained in a Jewish way. It's in German, but I'm sure there's something in English too. And yeah, I think the development in research in the last like 15 years went strongly into a direction to read the New Testament from a Jewish perspective. And yeah, we are definitely noticing this as well. And we're trying to catch up on this on this literature, but a Messianic rabbi would be definitely even better. Yeah, but we haven't met one yet. Yeah, thank you very much for attending and the attention. I will love to see you guys in person. Hopefully next year. And yeah, as said, if you haven't seen our game, you can visit our website 10500-.com, or if you're like, oh, do they have jobs? Yeah, we're probably hiring very, very soon at lightword-productions.com. There are also some jobs if you think this is a cool way to engage with a team that is doing a biblical game. And yeah, otherwise I'll be in the what is it called? The booth, not the booth, but the somewhere on the tables afterwards. So thank you very much, and you all have a good day, and see you later or whenever.